All right, I think that went pretty all right. How'd you feel about that one?
The weekly?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it was fantastic.
All right. You in the mood to do another one right now?
I'll have another.
And that will be on the MCU's Thor. Welcome to yet another Geek Show. I'm your host, Dalton Lee.
I am your host, Alex Ecker, and yes, I threw a beer bottle into a bunch of other beer bottles.
Did it break?
No, which sucks.
It would have been a more thrilling sound if you.
I can make
if you
it
broke
break.
it.
Do you want me to try and
want to
break
re-edit in a better sound?
I can try and break it right now.
Let's. That wasn't an honest suggestion. Oh shit!
Damn it! Damn it!
Oh my god!
Never mind. That didn't work out.
Okay, I'm gonna have to edit that a little quieter. That was startling.
You're welcome. Yeah, I clipped my mic doing that, but that was so worth it.
Oh Jesus! Okay, Thor, movie number 4. How about it?
Moving. God damn it!
It
I
happened.
Heard 4 and not Thor.
I said both.
Oh, did you?
Movie number 4, Thor. How about it?
Oh. I haven't watched it since I had seen it in the theaters. It had been that long. Yeah, it was my first time watching it in the theater.
Since the theater?
Since the theater.
I was going to say, you're not supposed to be in a theater right now.
No one is. I'm just waiting for another chance to... Oh, I just did it. Anytime the word another is coming in, I'm throwing another fucking beer bottle down.
You're going to make my editing a nightmare.
That's right.
So
at least you'll know where to find it in the waveform.
So you didn't remember much about this going into it then? If it's been that long?
I remembered more than I thought I would have. Like, is it sad though that the biggest thing that I forgot was the whole plot of the movie? Like, Anthony Hopkins just, whoever holds this hammer will get the power of Thor.
It's not a very memorable movie at all. And there are some things that are great that are just held back by the rest of the movie. Having Anthony Hopkins in there is like, we hadn't cemented yet at this time that like truly great, important actors are willing and interested to do these movies. And so he was we see it all the time now, but he was a big step of, oh, look at this actual great, important actor, stooping down to these comic book movies. They must be getting better. These must be real movies now.
Right.
So there is that, but like, it's not like they ask him to do much. That's great. Not that he was going to be a main character, and that's still how they usually do it. Cast someone who's somewhat unknown, usually for the lead, but then throw like
Wasn't
big.
Idris Elba pretty known before this movie, though?
Not really. I didn't know him until this movie.
Must have not existed until then.
I mean, he had his. What was that show he's known for? Luther? Is that it?
Yeah, Luther.
He had that, but he wasn't household. But I'm talking like the Academy Award winning actors.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the first handful that made these movies start to look a bit more serious. And, again, he's a side character, though. He doesn't contribute a whole lot to the movie, but he is great when he is there. Tom Hiddleston is really the standout. And what's kind of funny, though, is that like after the Avengers, which comes 2 movies later, just the next year, Tom Hiddleston becomes a household name and everyone loves him. And he's like, one of everyone's favorite things about the Avengers. But like nobody remembers that he was just as good in this one because the movie itself isn't that great. But Tom Hiddleston is already great in it. And especially with these are full spoiler discussions, by the way. 3, 2, 1. Okay, spoiling. So even with his his kind of sabotage plan, his whole like double crossing kind of thing going on, It's
triple
like
crossing you.
it's like when you watch it, like knowing what's going on, like he does such a good job at acting in such a way that like, hey, I'm trying to put off this vibe to Thor right now, but you know what I'm really thinking.
Right.
He can
And
do a
also
lot
the
with his
scene-
face.
Yeah, the scene where he like magics his way in after Thor gets captured by Shield.
Mm-hmm.
Like even when they do like the turnaround scene, like where it's just after him explaining everything and he turns around, he's not really smiling.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see it in his face that he's like, yep, this is how I wanted it.
Yeah, you can always see this slight bit of satisfaction. He'll be doing this thing where like, you know, to the rest of the group, it's, oh, this awful thing just happened, but actually things are going to, according to plan. So there's the slightest smirk sitting there that you don't quite notice if you're not looking for it and don't already know what's up. Like,
yeah,
he does a great job at kind of showing both emotions at the same time. He's really the standout, and like Chris Hemsworth is fine here, and I'm glad he's who we have now. But like Thor, the character's not great here, so he didn't really get his chance to prove himself.
I really like the like bravado that he gave Thor with being cocky and then becoming humble.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the scenes where he's being cocky are fantastic. You know what I mean?
He illustrates some comedy chops here and there. But he just doesn't strike me as particularly charismatic, though, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
They did go for this kind of vibe where, like, Kenneth Branagh, the director, I guess he's known for more like Shakespearean kind of things. So I guess they looked at the source material and went, oh, the Norse gods in Marvel Comics talk in these odd Shakespearean ways. And they don't do that in these movies anymore. But at least for the first movie, they thought they were sticking to that. So their theme was, Shakespeare, let's get this guy. And then Thor, Hemsworth put on that voice, and he doesn't really do it now. Today, he has his real, like, deep, low kind of rugged voice, but he's not saying these weird out of time things.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
Maybe there's exceptions here and there, but for the most part, they've changed the vibe from like, he's not so... They've leaned harder into his comedy since then.
Oh, absolutely.
They tried to take him a bit more seriously here. And I think he actually, like, outright after the Dark World, like, goes to Kevin Feige at Marvel and says, like, hey, I'm getting bored with this character. We've got to come up with something different. This, like, dark.
Yeah, there's a huge change in tone or shift in tone from Dark World to Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
Well, between Thor 1, Dark World 2, Ragnarok.
Yeah, and I guess he outright asked for it, and it worked out for the better. And it's like, I don't know, it's fine here. I don't blame them for thinking it was the right route to go, especially when, like, at this point, we're still trying to slowly amplify how silly these movies are allowed to be. Like, there was a time when we were kind of shocked that, like, oh, really? They're going to do Guardians of the Galaxy? But, like, now they've done Infinity War, and now they're talking about multiverses. They are getting so deep into the weird recesses of comic books that we will allow anything now. But at the time, like, this is right after, like, the reign of the X-Men movies where superheroes had to wear black leather because it was silly if they wore anything else.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So they wanted to take this kind of seriously, but also they wanted it to be a little funny at the same time. But Thor's not actually supposed to be a funny guy. He's just funny because they're doing a fish out of water story. So isn't it silly that he's saying these weird things here on Earth and getting funny looks out of people? It's not that he's actually a funny guy.
It's just he has outlandish culture versus what we have now.
Yeah, like assuming that people only keep pets that are large enough to ride. Like, that is hysterical,
Right.
but it's not Thor being a funny guy.
Right. It's just situationally funny.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about the Hawkeye surprise in here?
So my first time watching the movie, I did recognize what was going on there. And so it is nifty. Like, I recognized that it was supposed to be Hawkeye and it was a tease for the Avengers. And so, like, on the one hand, I don't think most people realize Hawkeye was in this movie. Unless you're someone that makes a habit of going back and marathoning these, occasionally. But like, people who saw this and then saw Avengers and then never went back to it, I don't think people realize he's there. Which is fine. It's kind of the epitome of, you know what? It is really cool because at this time, it was a lot more exciting. It can still be fun now, but it was a lot more exciting at the time to speculate on where this universe is going. And, and what
we had a whole conversation about this. Yeah,
just figuring out what franchises might be coming and picking out what hints and clues are in the background and stuff. And, having no idea that this universe would branch out into things as big and crazy as like Endgame was, and just how many superheroes we would introduce in this universe. So every little thing like that going, oh shit, is that supposed to be Hawkeye? That's cool. Like, that was a really big
speculation
thing
that they did was in the credit scene, because they were like, Thor will return in the Avengers. So like, at that point when we seen, they're talking about the Avengers now, like, holy shit. Like,
and I mean, we knew the Avengers were coming since Iron Man, of course, but still, like, you might very well have,
as an official.
You very well might have been here because, you liked Iron Man. You knew it was building up to the Avengers. Let's see these other movies building up to it too. And for the people that read the comics and recognize these characters and are able to speculate on where it might be going, it's super cool to see things like that. Like, was that supposed to be Hawkeye? Awesome. Cool.
Right.
And it's different from what Iron Man 2 did, in that Iron Man 2 was like, let's squeeze Nick Fury and Black Widow into here to start setting up the Avengers, but like give them just enough screen time that like they're pulling time away from the actual story and they're just being a distraction and a nuisance and a waste of screen time. Here, it's like, if Hawkeye wasn't in that scene, you still had that scene. He wasn't a distraction. He wasn't pulling screen time away from more important things. Right. It also didn't do much to expand the universe, because him being there didn't mean anything to you if you didn't already know who Hawkeye is and know that this is building to the Avengers with Hawkeye. Right? Like if you're not sitting there speculating, you just go, that's some guy. So it didn't really build anything. It didn't establish another plot point or anything for you. It's just an extra bit of fun that doesn't distract from anything.
He reaches
it's cool.
For the rifle and then puts it away and then grabs the bow instead. You'd have to know your Marvel lore to have that make any sort of semblance
to mean anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess it wouldn't have. Yeah, it didn't really take tons away from the movie.
You might not even notice that like the camera gave an unusual amount of focus to him. You might not think anything of it.
Oh no, I noticed that. Because like,
I mean,
you had more script than anybody in that fight scene. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Can we talk about things that did take away from the screen time?
Nearly everything on Earth shouldn't have been here.
Yeah, but I was about to say Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman is so bad in this movie.
She really is. It feels awkward teenage drama movie, or like the people we went to high school with that would scratch you and then hiss at you and run away.
And it's like,
you know what I mean?
And I don't think it's her.
No, I don't think it is.
Like
either.
Natalie Portman. Natalie Portman's great. She's one of the greatest actresses we have. Black Swan is one of my favorite movies, and it hinges on her performance being good. She's great. She's wrong for this role, and everyone is wrong for this role because this role is terrible. Yeah. This role is like, oh, let me simultaneously sell my character as somebody so brilliant that S.H.I.E.L.D. is after my research, just truly one of the world's greatest scientists. Also, I'm swooning over Thor because he's hot.
Yeah.
And just this weird, ditzy, like, high school thing going on where it just they didn't come up with a good excuse for why she's into Thor.
Right.
And, like, her character is in the comics, and in the comics, like, especially in the 60s and 70s where these origin stories come from, like, yeah, every superhero has a significant other. And at this point in filmmaking, still to some extent today, but especially at this time, like, yeah, it was a really big deal that you always tried to squeeze in that hero's iconic significant other from the comics. But here, they just didn't bother to make her any good. To give her something that makes sense, to make you want to see her.
Yeah. The only thing that they really had that made sense was the end credit scene. That was the only reason they pretty much had anything on Earth.
There's no charisma between the two, and, like,
yeah,
you know, that relationship not working aside, like, they include Earth in the storyline because that's how they chose to. Well, A, they needed to because you need to get Thor into the Avengers, but B, like, yeah, it was a good way to address the thing they wanted to tackle, which was Thor's arrogance and making him not worthy and making him learn what it is to be worthy. But, like, the problem, though, is Asgard is such a compelling, interesting thing to put on screen. Yeah. You're giving us the first, like, superhero fantasy movie. You've gone from, like, Iron Man, which is kind of like, if it wasn't comic book tied, it's kind of, it's not even particularly out there sci-fi. It's pretty mild sci-fi if you remove it from Marvel and him having a superhero name. And then the Incredible Hulk, like Hulk,
strictly sci-fi
again, like, yeah, kind of sci-fi thriller. Monster B movie kind of thing. Iron Man 2, the same thing. This is ever so slightly heightened action movie. Here you've gone full-blown fantasy, but decided to not really lean into it and just spend a lot of time showing us the most boring town I've ever seen on a movie screen.
Well, how about this? If there wasn't any of this romancy bullshit between Jane Foster and Thor, I think her character would have worked out a lot better.
If Natalie Portman only needed to sell herself as a scientist, she could do it. They were asking her to sell herself as two different things that didn't have the writing to make them compatible.
Yeah. Because then that would make a lot of the Earth stuff have a little more semblance and, like, maybe a little more want in the movie. Because, like,
and cutting down on their bad relationship stuff would have meant less time sitting here looking at Earth, less time looking at this boring, what is it, New Mexico? This boring little desert town in New Mexico. It's just so unappealing to look at. It's the tiniest, boringest, emptiest little town.
Although I do have to say,
you're putting that in a movie with Asgard. Maybe they intentionally went for the most boring town they could possibly think of because they thought they were making some kind of visual statement with, like, the polar opposites, with how extravagant Asgard is. Maybe that's the idea, but it still means that half of your fantasy movie is boring to look at.
I don't know. It's one of those things too where it's like, do you think the joke would have sold more if the world, like with like Thor being outworldish, like fish out of water sort of situation, along with, like, Sif and the rest of them? Do you think that joke would have sold more if the town had something more interesting in it going on?
I don't think the joke really changes either way. I'm just saying, like, the joke works. They get good comedy out of it, but I think you're going to get the same kind of jokes and you can get the same exact plot line if you're not in this boring little town. So I'm really just fixated on
more for me.
Okay.
Because you've got pickup trucks and trucker hats. And, you know, with you selling me the idea of Shakespearean sort of ideologies or tendencies, I think that sells the joke a little more now.
Sure. I'm also kind of saying, though, that, like, my problem is just how much time is the town, right? Because, like, I don't hate that he comes to Earth. He needs to come to Earth. He needs to meet humans. He needs to get set up for the Avengers. He needs to go through this arc. And again, you do get great comedy out of it. And I don't know, maybe the comedy benefits from being in this particular town. I'm just saying you spend so much time in this town, and not all of it is for the sake of comedy. A lot of it's for the sake of building their dumb, unconvincing relationship.
Yeah.
And dwelling on quarrels between human characters. Like, I don't know, S.H.I.E.L.D. being there, okay, technically it's world building and a little bit of Avengers setup, I guess. But also, I don't care what's going on between them and Jane. I keep showing me what's going on with Thor. I came here for this fantasy movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more interested in the plot versus the character development here. I mean, the only important character development here is Thor. And I suppose you can't really have that without other characters.
Well, Loki.
Loki too.
Well, does Loki grow? Loki finds out about
his the wrong direction.
Loki finds out about his true upbringing, and then his goals move a little more into, like, he kind of has the same goals, but they become a little more rooted in anger, whereas they're originally kind of just jealousy. Yeah. Right? Like, I guess up front, it's like he has a master plan to become the king of Asgard because he thinks he's better suited to it than Thor. So it's a jealousy thing over his brother. But then
he realizes that he's not Asgardian.
And becomes more angry about being lied to. And so now there's also vengeance added to his motivations to the same goal.
Yeah.
So he goes through a little bit of development, but
the whole fight with him and Thor at the end, his acting, Tom Hiddleston's acting there was fucking phenomenal. Because it shows frantic very well, but frantic yet composed. It's weird. Because, like, Loki as a character throughout the entirety of Marvel has always been methodical and very much so, like, 5 steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
And to see him lash out still feels like it's part of that plan.
You know what I mean? And he at times, again, through the whole universe, does this thing where, like, he is always several steps ahead. He also wants you to know that he's several steps ahead of you, and so he'll put on this, like, cocky face, but then, like, you still also get glimpses throughout the universe of him being genuinely worried or scared about something, but trying not to be obvious about it. So, like, the Dark World, he's sitting in a cell and has a conversation with Thor where he's looking real confident, but then his illusion goes away and you see him actually sitting there, like, really emotionally fucked up
and distraught and disheveled.
You also, like, in Ragnarok, see him become genuinely scared that the Hulk showed up.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then kind of try to play it off.
Man, I don't want to review the Dark World. I don't, because we come to another character here, Selvig, Dr. Selvig, who kind of feels like Rhodey in Iron Man 1 to Jane.
Okay.
I don't like this guy.
Sure.
He's dangerous. Stay away from him, Tony. I mean, Jane.
You know what I
mean?
He's not compelling here, but I think
It's a fairy tale, Jane.
he also distracts a little less. You're right. I guess the problem with him here is that him being there makes more of the movie about Jane, which is my problem. So, like, I don't have a problem with him directly because he doesn't get a ton of screen time and he's not particularly great or bad either way at this point.
Yeah.
He's just kind of there to, I don't know, have a scientist in the movie, I guess. But, like, so on those grounds, he's fine. But also, really, he's there to give Jane a human to talk to. And that does lead to more of the story being about her.
Are you kidding me? What about Darcy? Her and her meow meow talk.
Darcy's actually hilarious, and I wish she was still around.
Right. You're right. I was trying to just hold it back.
And you know what? Now that I think about it, it's weird. I said a minute ago that I didn't think anyone could sell what Natalie Portman had to do, which was simultaneously be a brilliant scientist and swoon over Thor for no reason. But I guess she does that. But maybe
political science.
But I guess she you know what, the difference is that she's not supposed to be like top class. It's not like she has research that SHIELD is coming after. She's just kind of, I went to college.
Yeah. I downloaded 30 songs on my iPod and they stole it.
You can make it through school and be an idiot. So,
I mean, we're both living proof of that.
Yeah.
Except the only difference is one of us graduated.
Yeah. Now, I can't say that
college.
I can't say that she contributes anything truly like worthwhile to the Thor movies that she's in. Like, she doesn't have like a memorable story purpose for either of her two movies. She just makes me laugh and distracts very little of the screen time. So I'm fine with it.
It's nice to have a few one-offs.
A boring, uninteresting character is like it's hard to call a particular character a problem unless they are drawing attention away from more important things.
Yeah.
So her and Selvig, it's like, yeah, they're there. All she has going for her is that she's funny. Selvig doesn't really have anything going for him here, but like, at least they're not actually distracting me from Asgard like Jane Foster is.
Right.
But maybe they are by giving Jane Foster people to talk to.
I don't know. I like everything Asgard in this movie. There's nothing really boring going on. You're right. The ending scene where Thor gets killed, basically, that was the only, like, that and when he tried to get the hammer were like the best scenes too. Everything else is just kind of meh, you know?
Oh, and then the Destroyer, the big robot.
Yeah, the Destroyer.
So I
got X-Men vibes from that.
Oh yeah, he's kind of a Sentinel.
Yeah.
Him being on Earth too. It's funny. I find him super bland and boring, and then he's the one they put on this bland and boring New Mexico part of the story. And I know he's not technically the final showdown because you end up dealing with Loki after the fact. But when you're watching that scene facing off with him in New Mexico, it feels like it's supposed to be the climax, but like the climax sucks.
Yeah.
And I have that every time I watch this. I always go, oh, geez, is this really the third act of the movie? This is the most boring superhero thing I've ever seen. And then you go back to Asgard and I'm like, oh, that's right. There's more. That was like Act 2. We're okay. We can go out on a better note.
The Rainbow Bridge. I feel kind of bummed that we didn't get to see more of Asgard before that was blown up. Like, because there's 9 realms. Like, I don't know how you are with your...
Well, breaking the Rainbow Bridge ends up not meaning anything immediately, though.
Yeah, but then you have it.
So I don't mind
entered.
that this movie didn't dive into more realms, because like even Asgard, like Asgard looks good, but it's also like for the amount of money they were putting into these movies at the time, it's like they just barely pulled off making it look good and couldn't have really stretched their budget any further. So I don't really blame them for not trying to get more realms into this movie, but then them breaking the Rainbow Bridge at the end, which at the time felt like a really big major move. They hand wave it in the Avengers immediately and it means nothing.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I don't know.
So that's not
the whole destruction though, like the props and everything that they used, like the practical, like over like the holding over the Odin grabbing Thor and Loki and trying to pull them up. That like the practical effect there was really good looking. Because like of all the textures, I thought that would have been like crystallized or like glass would not have been the texture I would have thought the bridge would have been. You know what I mean? I would have thought it would just been like an ethereal like light.
Sure. Okay.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in the comics, at least the like 60s comics, it's literally a rainbow. So yeah, you would think, oh, they're gonna literally walk on some light, but here, they made Asgard a bit more sci-fi than like. I can't speak for the Marvel comics of around the time this movie came out, but just strictly speaking of the 60s Thor comics, like this leaned way more sci-fi than those books ever were.
Yeah.
And that's fine because it to me, making Thor kind of fantasy and sci-fi kind of helps like give that thing that makes the Marvel universe feel like a coherent thing. It makes it feel like, oh, I guess this franchise as a whole, if you had to call it something other than superhero, it's a sci-fi franchise.
Okay.
So yeah, that said, the Rainbow Bridge is done great. Again, everything in Asgard looks great. The costuming work is done great. All of that stuff is immediately improved upon by everything that comes after this movie. But like, it's kind of a budget thing more than anything. No, The Dark World is a bad movie, but it looks great.
Oh yeah, it does.
The Dark World actually looks incredible, I would say. It's just a bad movie. And it has a lot more of Asgard, which is what I was complaining about this movie not having.
Oh, yeah. That's right. I forgot.
But they put a lot more money into making
our
Asgard
first
look good.
Infinity Stone in this movie.
Oh yeah.
With the Tesseract.
Yeah, we have the Tesseract here.
Which, can you clarify something for me with that ending credit scene? Was Loki holding Selvig hostage?
I'm going to be honest. On this rewatch, I didn't watch to the end credit scene.
Oh, I fast forwarded to the end credit scene.
And I
also noticed that they played Foo Fighters in the end.
In the credits. Yeah, that was super weird.
Yeah.
I hate it when licensed music shows up in my movie credits.
I like Foo Fighters. It does not fit Thor.
No.
Like, at all.
No, that's so dumb. I hate it.
Yeah.
I can kind of visualize the end credit scene in my head, but to be honest, I don't really remember the implications of it.
Damn it. All right.
Well,
because
we know that
because they had Tom Hiddleston like fling out of like a mirrored reflection, and he said something like, well, I guess we'll have to look at that. And then that's when Selvig said the exact same thing. Like he was being like held hostage to find
Loki can control people with his scepter.
This is before he had the scepter.
He doesn't have the scepter during that scene?
No. Wasn't the scepter using the Tesseract?
No, that's two different stones.
Oh, that's right. Because it's the Tesseract had the Time Stone? No. The Time Stone's Doctor Strange. Reality Stone.
Space.
Was it space?
They call it space, I believe.
The Space Stone?
Yeah. And I think the one in the scepter is what they call the Mind Stone. Mind Stone. The one in the scepter is the Mind Stone. The one in the Tesseract is space, because the Tesseract does teleportation.
Because Ultron has the Soul Stone, correct?
We never see the Soul Stone till Infinity War.
Yeah.
You're thinking
Or
Vision.
Sorry, not Ultron. Yeah, Vision.
The stone that he has is what came out of the scepter.
Oh, okay. I'm a little rough on these.
Yeah, the scepter breaks in Age of Ultron, and that's when I haven't thought about. Look, I know, right? I haven't watched one of these since I was watching Endgame in theaters. I have to brush up my recollection of what power each stone had and what they were named and how they were color coded and where they exist in what movies. I don't remember.
Dalton, listen. For those of you that are still, entertained enough to listen to us bitch, I'm going to bitch a little more. Dalton would sit there for hours on end talking to me about Marvel shit before I cared about Marvel shit. And he would talk about, oh yeah, the stones and this and that. Listen, dude, this means that this is actually not this, but is that thing instead. Which that's huge because I'm sitting there like, dude, can we just fucking write music or something?
I remember rambling to you in your kitchen about the fact that they were making an Ant-Man movie immediately after an Ultron movie, and what the hell, guys? Fuck you.
Oh my god. How long ago was that?
Today, today, watching these movies, it's like you said, I used to do that, and it's some of the difference is that at the time I was reading a ton of comics, and today I don't really. I largely stopped reading them throughout college. But like, I don't get as much fun now out of dissecting and looking at the possibilities, and I don't really pay much attention to the rumors anymore for several reasons, such as like this universe has reached a point where like they can't do anything that would surprise me. Right?
Yeah, they've already kind of hit the payoff for you.
Right? Like back then, I'm like, no, they wouldn't really do Thanos, would they? Are we really about to do Infinity War? And now it's like, no matter what people rumor, I'm always just like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. Obviously, they would do that.
Right.
So nothing can surprise me anymore. They also have started, like, they've expanded out into so many characters that characters are getting covered now that I don't know anything about. So like the Eternals is coming. I don't know anything about the Eternals. I can't have any fun speculating about the Eternals and what they might do with them unless I sit down and start reading some of their comics and learning about them. And I don't feel like it. And also, I've seen enough of these now that the impact of seeing these comic books I love brought to life, it's not as big of like, outside of something like Endgame or Infinity War, it's not such a big event for me. It's not such a crazy thing to have this comic book thing brought to life anymore. And so now my fanboyism kind of goes away and I dissect them a little bit more honestly as a movie experience. So like right now, talking about these phase 1 movies, I've been a real bummer about them because I'm no longer like, I'm not thinking anymore about how hype it is to be seeing these comic books on screen. Now I'm looking at it and going, okay, this story that happens to be about a comic book character, is it actually good? Not really. Right. it's fine.
Oh, shit. Do you have any other thoughts about this movie?
The score is sometimes great, but usually forgettable.
Yeah.
There are moments where I'm like, oh, there are moments where I'm like, oh, this is a really great melody. I wish we kept using this as a theme. It bothers me that the MCU barely touches having musical themes outside of the Avengers.
Yeah.
But a lot of it didn't stand out. There were just moments here and there. This movie's just fine to me. I don't have any major complaints out of There's Too Much Time on Earth and Jane Foster's bad. And I have great stuff. Yeah. Asgard looks great. And Tom Hiddleston is phenomenal in this movie. But it's just, if this weren't an MCU movie, nobody would be talking about it in 2020. No one would
True.
remember this. man, I know they were just figuring out what they were doing with phase one, but I'm hoping as this rewatch starts going that I start legitimately enjoying some MCU movies again, because we are 4 movies in and the first Iron Man is still the only
We have
one.
20 left to go.
The first Iron Man is still, this far the only one where I'm like, no, this is actually pretty good, except for that third act. Man, what was that? So like, I can't even say there's one great movie so far.
So what movie's next? Is it Captain America?
Yes.
Okay. And then after that is Iron Man 3?
Avengers.
Oh, is it Avengers and then Iron Man 3?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it is Avengers and Iron Man 3.
So,
What about Winter Soldier? When does that come in? Is that after Avengers?
all right, let's worry about our schedule off air. But
Yeah. I'm trying to remember it and see if I can think about it.
we'll see you guys on our next spotlight for Captain America, the first Avenger. Thanks
On
for...
another spotlight.
Go ahead.
All right.
Oh, Jesus Christ. No one's going to come back after that.
All right. Bye.